very clearly not an academic, although I work at the University of Edinburgh. I did train, when I came to Edinburgh, to the College of Art to study in this architecture school. But I got more involved in Torness and campaigning against nuclear power and energy matters, and have been energy manager at the university since '89, and I'm now increasingly a little bit off the tools now, and have had a role as sustainability advisor to the wider university. Just recently came out of estates and buildings, and so we're in this new department called social responsibility and sustainability. This is a completely blatant fish for ideas and comments. And it's in the light of the experience that we've had as a publicly funded body being obligated to use BREEAM, as everybody calls it. And of course, you know, our design teams are juggling away and achieving BREEAM Excellent, or quite extraordinary, I don't quite know how, an outstanding rating for the Edinburgh Centre for Carbon Innovation, both in design and in implementation. So what I'm going to be talking about is a scheme which is definitely under this. We set the BREEAM threshold at 5 million and more, because the overhead is so ridiculous and so significant that going through that process of having an assessor on board, an extra man or woman on the job, is quite onerous. And it doesn't seem to be necessarily getting better buildings for us necessarily. It sort of cajoles the design team on. And this is a program which was designed and developed with some initial support from Skanska, the big contractor. I think that's why it's called SCAR. It's a bit of an odd name. It's not Scandinavia or anything. I think it's short for Skanska. It has been developed by the Royal Incorporation of Chartered Surveyors. So what they've done is they're looking at, you might be all well aware of the concept of shell and core buildings, and many office buildings are now designed as shell and core, which is the sort of unchanging bit, the guts of the structure, and then fit out, and so on. And it's recognizing, and certainly in the office world, you know, there's a hell of a churn, and sometimes there's only 10 years between fit-outs. And so this is a very good market, and often it's a lighter touch, quicker, shorter projects. And so this is a tool which is similar to these ones Richard's been sort of casting aspersions on properly, I think, that can help. Our department, although I'm out of estates and buildings, I'm in a funny 18th century cottage on the meadows at the moment, all huggledy-piggledy, sitting on each other's laps. And hopefully in about a year's time, we will have moved into the boiler house, which is in High School Yards. So we're using the fact that we're client, I'm the client for a small department of about 20 people who are going to be moving into this. You know, there's still a lift contractor in there at the moment, sort of doing some work in an adjacent building. But shortly, we'll get access to it, be able to tear down the plasterboard and open up the ceiling and see what the score is. It's been in a fairly derelict state for quite a while. This is really just clear what it's potentially for. Unlike BREEAM, where you have to buy the whole boondoggle really and pay good money for somebody, this is something which can be done at a light touch, because the whole kit and caboodle is available. It's 100 pages of different sets of criteria which the client and the design team can select and choose between as to their appropriateness for that project. So it isn't asking how many showers you've got and all that sort of stuff necessarily, and giving you tick marks for bicycle racks necessarily. But it's a tool which enables the client group with the design team to benchmark against a series of eminently sensible things which could and should be done, or have been done already in practice. Now, what's interesting to me in with my estates development colleagues, who are all hard-nosed practical men who want to, mostly men, but who want to get the job done to time, to budget, and on to the next thing, is that they're saying, ooh, they're not seeing it as an extra thing on top. They're seeing it as a demystifier thing, because they can read, and it's pretty simple. I think it's 350 pages, the Briam thing now. It's just unbelievable. And it's arcane as well. But this is narrative, simple thing. So it enables a client to determine how far they want to go early on, and to benchmark against, and then to get it if you want to. And in the little pile of the explanations, I've printed out a little briefing for you to take away. You can go online, it's completely straightforward. There's one with a half dozen or 8 assessors who seem to be listed in Scotland. So you can pay somebody to do a light touch thing. So that first picture of the old Royal High School and all the associated refurbishment of that into its 5th life. It's not, people talk about refurbished, but we're talking about life cycles going around. It's been a surgical hospital. It's been a Department of Archaeology. It's been a Royal High School. It's been all sorts of dental hospital, a dental school, and so on. That was a £6 million project. It's quite sensible to do a Briam, and it actually helped, in that case, the design team, who were already members of SEDA and so on, to do the right thing, and it incentivized them and helped them get their M&E consultants arm up the back so that they were trying to do the right thing. But the observation here is, and this is the RICS, obviously sniping a little bit at BRE, I suppose, is that they want something pragmatic, and we've got it. So there are these simple measures which got a couple of pages on them, which is the criteria, what's up, and then how you would meet that. And there are things like the lighting requirement is actually moderately onerous. I think it's 11 watts per square metre or something like that, which is a moderately onerous. It will stretch. They won't be able to put lots of fancy lighting in and so on. But because it's from the surveyors, who are the cost consultants and so on, it's slightly more trusted than if some wild-eyed, wacky environmental advisor comes along and advises it. So, this is our building. It's a stone building. It's in a conservation area. We're not going to be able to do a great deal with it. At the far end is, you can see, is a garage bit which was obviously tacked on at one stage, which runs the depth of the building. That's single story at the moment. So there will be an opportunity to put an additional floor on there, because we do need a bit more space than is the floor plan at the moment. So it's going to be quite interesting. We will have some new component and some existing massive stone-built component. So, in the same way that you can get design-only ratings for BREEAM or LEED and so on, there are 3 levels, or 3 times when you can undertake an assessment. And obviously, now I'm completely honest, I've literally scooped up what they've got on their website, so you'll find it on the website, so this isn't rocket science, but I'm just opening it up as a simple, lightweight tool that enables and could bring benefits for all of us in the thing. If you can keep control on the complexity of it, it could be an aide-memoire, a simple process, which is like a side pad for you to use in your weekly or monthly design meetings with the design tool. And that's what I'm hoping that we will do as we go through. We're even at a 2B sketch scheme design. Can we get enough desks in? That's really in terms of floor area. So we're nowhere near anything about materials or anything yet. But I'm hoping that because they don't see it as threatening, it'll enable them and they'll use it as a checklist. It'll give them a bit of leverage with the M&E consultants, and so they can say, well, how are you doing? But also for us, I mean, we're the equivalent of a tenant in the sort of traditional office thing. Oh, I should say that there are two schemes at the moment, one for offices, that's where lots of lucre is, and one for retail, so these big retail parks and so on. So they're the two things which are churned quite often. And I'm involved in a small project that the Higher Education Funding Council for England has funded, SLab, which is a laboratories for supporting world-class science. We're looking at mapping these criteria and developing some additional criteria for laboratories, because they do get a bit complicated, and there is some good practice from different parts and some in the States. So then now all of these are process things, a lot of them. They're just enable, but it's quite light touch. So when Robert is suggesting he wants to put a particular way of, that's a project. Another is to continue the slated roof over and so on. So there's different ways. We'll be able to assess them against these criteria that we've, in the next month or so, we will determine are appropriate. It does enable you, a bit like for ourselves in implementing BREEAM. I've said BREEAM, yeah. You can game it. You can get more points for the bicycle racks and so on. We have additionally invited design teams to aspire to a 30% betterment against building standards on CO2. But not only, that's relatively easy when we're plugging it into our CHP, because that's a low carbon form of electricity and waste heat in a way. We've also asked them to achieve a 30% betterment against kilowatt hours, in other words, the actual design heat loss of the building as well. And that does stretch them, particularly as the building standards improve. But I am very disappointed to find practically always that they're just above the threshold for excellent, or whatever it is. That there's not really the appetite for pushing. And that was what was so different about Callum Duncan's and Malcolm Fraser's approach, was that they were really pushing hard, even with a national masonry building next door. And they've got lots of powertherm in by a natural material inboard of the wall. Now, it's for you all to consider whether something like this, which is a light touch, exercise book sort of thing, rather than a big scheme, is going to be helpful for you. But it does seem to be that a lot of contractors toil a bit, and then they get another subcontractor in, another specialist in, who's going to do the BREEAM dance for them and so on. And so by keeping it fairly straightforward, it's more likely a simple, a project manager for a contractor would be able to be able to cope. I've mentioned these 100 odd criteria for the office. I think that there's a similar number for retail. We might evolve a few additional ones for laboratories and educational buildings. But what's important is that you don't have to do all of them. You determine which are applicable, which are relevant criteria. And these are called measures in scope, and this is part of the initial process, but it's getting the juices going with the design team. However, and this is just an example of just the first rough sketches which Robert's done to suggest we might open up, so we get where there's a bit of plasterboard ceiling and so on, we might open it up and get some skylight into the middle of that area. So, but then they also have a small number of measures which they call gateway measures, which are thresholds effectively, and they suggest that you really should be in for each of bronze, silver, and gold. So at either of the three stages, at the design stage, or the construction stage, or post-occupancy, that the rating itself breaks into three parts. It's a decision taken by the client and the design team. Second, then, if you look, and the second opportunity is when you've got the delivery, the construction, those weeks in an office fit, refit, maybe, and then obviously there's the final stage, which is an option, and you could get it each time. Now in the insert there are the names of the 8 or so who are registered in Scotland. So that's a very whistle-stop tour around, and I'm as much interested in what you feel, whether there's something that's a light touch thing that might be appropriate. It's trying to find an appropriate thing which is not so onerous, because everybody talks with a rather hangdog face about BRIAM, and the problems are, and we can't get the evidence and so on, and it's all a fight about the evidence, and oh, you haven't got enough meters in, and we never read the bloody meters, because they say you've got to have a meter on every heating circuit and stupid things like that. When you've got a very well insulated building, we don't want lots of different heating zones, but they say they won't give us a point unless every floor has got a heating zone and so on. But we're having it on such a low variable temperature single circuit heating for the background heat. That's all that's necessary. So that's my pitch. In a way, it's a funny timing thing here. I would have liked to have been able to say, well, and we found this and this and this. But I thought I would pitch in because I'm interested in to see whether this is potentially an appropriate vehicle that might, at small scale buildings, probably even in domestic, but in small scale projects, of which there's lots, be more appropriate.